72,000 people employed in the space and a market size of about 36 billion, so quite significant. And another key factor of the Australian market that is unique to us here in Australia that impacts everything, that has impacted the innovation, the way Australian residential real estate has innovated, and I suspect also starting to affect how development has innovated, is this idea of vendor-paid marketing. Now, vendor-paid marketing is seller-sponsored marketing. So when you are a real estate agent earning only 2.5% commission on a property, you're not really going to want to spend an awful lot of money on marketing. So back in the 80s, when colour printing became really cool amongst newspaper companies, they worked out a way to get more money out of real estate agents by creating this thing called vendor-paid advertising. And what it is that when you are selling a property, you pay the agent an additional fee to handle the marketing of your campaign. And this, and that can be negotiated directly, and it's up to the agent to sell you what that campaign looks like. And this is really important because it's fostered an awful lot of innovation in our market. So in the residential space, the sales and marketing Proptechs are the most established and the most have a long heritage of innovating in that space. Vendor-paid marketing was invented by Fairfax and News Corp, and it then migrated to the digital model. And this is interesting too, because what it means is that unlike in the US, where Zillow and the big websites, the big property portals are using lead generation and getting agents to pay on the leads that they're sending them, the Australian digital market is all around paid advertising. And that paid advertising is coming from the sellers of their properties. And so this is probably going to help explain why developers are often being asked to, it impacts on that developer market as well. Now we're seeing that budget, obviously, as print declines and digital becomes more and more expensive as well, and people start to grumble about the power of the property portals to direct, to determine what agents do. We're seeing a lot of desire for that to move into social media. But the approach of Facebook and the big portal and the big social media to help yourself and work out what to do versus the way that agents had their hands held by Australian media to use vendor-paid advertising, they're very confused in that space. So there's a lot of innovation starting to go into that social media space to look at how do you help agents or developers actually proactively reach out to people on social media, and how do you find buyers and sellers using social media? That's a big pain point. And we have two very dominant portals in our market. So realestate.com, $115 million visitors monthly, $430 million in revenue, Domain, 32.5 million visitors, and an audience. And they claim that their audience is higher net worth because they're from the vast suburbs. But their revenue is 261 million. And what we're seeing both of those portals do is that while their revenue model is mainly around this paid advertising, which is being funded by either the vendor paid model or by a direct advertising model, we're seeing them make some strategic purchases that are basically extending their business strategy to tie more closely to getting closer to agents and getting more closer to real estate consumers. And the fear of agents is that they will start to take over and replace agents in that space. Now, the shape of the Australian market is also really influential on the technology that's being developed, because if you can invent technology that can service 6 different states and 2 different territories, all of which have completely different legislation across, a variety of property management and property sales procedures, then once you've managed to do that, it's really easy to then start to conceive how you would scale into the US or how you would scale into overseas markets. So we see that this creates a great, really effective way for Proptechs to get their chops on how they would scale. The real estate institutes are also really state-based, and what's really interesting about the Australian market is that while we have a really robust and solid banking structure and financial advice structure, because property is actually legislated at a state level, there are no rules governing property investment advice. So there's a big gap in that space too, which organisations like the Property Investment Professionals Association are trying to address. But it's very hard to get a government to address federally where there is no legislation. And here's another key thing which is really an important differentiator between commercial and residential real estate and the innovation that's happening in it. This is one of the reasons why I think the residential space is growing a lot faster than commercial in some ways. And that is that due to the work of CoreLogic and Pricefinder over the last 10 or more years, we have basically a very open data space in residential property compared to a very closed data space in commercial property. So there's big players in data. In residential, it's quite easy to get access to an open API. That has driven a lot of transparency and education. Informed buyers and sellers make better decisions, which create better relationships. And technology is enabling all of us to move from a transactional model to a service model, which means that we're looking at ways of building relationships for life. In the commercial space, a lot of the innovation is being very focused on, well, how do I even capture my data? What is my data? I don't even know what it is. How do I create a smart building out of an existing piece of stock? 90% of our commercial building stock is actually old and established. How do we map that? How do we map to make those smart buildings? How do we make them safe? How do we sell and refurbish them better? That all comes down to the data. So these days of real estate agents in the commercial space proprietarily owning the data is going to be taken off them as building owners become better at understanding their data. And there's also a lot of Proptechs out there that are very keen to help you with that. This is, I put this on mainly for effect. So this is a slide created by Business 2. It's the Proptech universe as of 2019. It's grown a little bit since then. So they were able to capture 188 Proptechs that were active in the residential space alone. Now, at the Proptech Association of Australia, we have been going for about 12 months. We are coming up to over 100 members now. We've only started taking paid memberships since January, but we find new Proptechs every single day. And by our estimates, there's around about 500 to 600, somewhere in that space, of Proptechs operating in Australia across the residential and commercial divide. Now let's talk about some pain points, because this is where innovation is starting to happen and where new innovation it needs to occur. So in residential, we see some really keen pain points in Australia around housing affordability. Stock, there's not enough stock out there. It's not necessarily built for what people are looking for, or it's not just the whole being able to even rent or buy it is changing dramatically. Really poor buyer experiences. So what we saw in those statistics originally is that in Australian residential real estate, the focus is on the seller. So agents make their money out of a seller, so buyers are left to fend for themselves. That's not the case in the US. And so there's very little motivation for agents to take care of buyers. So we see a lot of pain in that space. Transaction transparency, how does it all work? Why is it that I can order a pizza, or I can have a movie chosen for me on my mobile phone, but the minute I spend $1.2 million on a property, my whole life goes to hell and I have absolutely no idea what's going on. It's more money that I spent on anything, but my control over it is absolutely terrible. We see a lot of confusion around settlement complexity, rental bonds and poor rental experiences. We are changing as a society. Millennials are overtaking the baby boomers. Renting is no longer a second-class citizen kind of status, and millennial renters are requiring and demanding a lot better service. We're also seeing a lot of innovation happening around agent marketing, pain in the social space. Commission-only business model is quite broken. Issues around data ownership. So real estate agents want to take back ownership of the data, or at least understand what they've added to it or how they have enhanced it. And there's a lot of, and if you thought that real estate was difficult, try renovating a property, because the minute you buy a property and then try to improve it in any way, you go back to 1800 to follow a process that was established back then. And we're seeing issues around a desire for smart home conversion. So in Australia, we are the highest adopters of rooftop solar panels. But what happens after that? And how do I know how much value that's added to my house? And what are all the issues around that? In commercial, we see really manual processes. It seems that every commercial building in every city across Australia is run with a spreadsheet, a whiteboard and a filing cabinet in the basement.
And this is slightly terrifying. We see a lot of reliance on those physical forms and the IP of the people who have always worked there. As businesses, this makes us very vulnerable to the IP when that IP walks out the door. So we need to be really looking at how we capture it and then how we use it to build the value of our portfolio. I haven't yet met a builder or a developer who has not been interested in how to save money or how to make more money on their products. I find it absolutely astonishing that the idea of adopting technology to actually considerably save both running costs and building costs seems to be so difficult because we just don't want the inconvenience of learning something new. Really opaque, lack of common data definition. So what defines an industrial property? Is it how much floor space does it have compared to the office space? There's no kind of consistency around how we define things like in the same way that residential has kind of come to an agreement whether you capture it that way or not, but we have very common data definitions around house versus an apartment versus time on market versus all of that stuff. Every agency has its own definitions, and that makes it hard to understand data because you don't know what you're really looking at. You have a lot more questions as opposed to clarify what you're looking at, as opposed to questions to understand what you should do next. Traditional facility management and disparate management structures. So every building's got a little man that lives in the basement who decides what happens inside that building, and they may or may not be open to change. 95% of them are not. And how do we move? And one of the biggest challenges that we have in the world, but especially in Australia, is that we have this ambition and goal and desire, which is absolutely essential to create smart cities and smart buildings. And then we have our traditional building stock. And no one has mapped the journey in between. And so what that means is that those facility managers sitting in the basement can say, oh, you'll never fly, can't see how it'll work. So what we see, that's a real pain point. So how do we capture the data in our existing buildings, and then how do we make it smart so that we can convert old buildings into smart buildings? Really big global challenge. Construction waste, starting to cost us a fortune, maybe we should deal with it. And the construction business model, like I said, firmly rooted in 1800 something, if not earlier. Now I'm going to let Jonathan talk about accelerators, VCs and funding, except to make the comment that there's not a lot of it in Australia. It's quite limited. And that's kind of both a blessing and a curse. It was certainly a blessing, I think, during COVID, because the small business mentality of Australians of coming up with an idea, bootstrapping it and getting it started meant that we didn't expect a lot of money to be around, and we didn't see a major exodus, or if there was an exodus of capital, it didn't affect a lot of our Proptechs. What we have seen in the last 12 months is an awful lot of activity around M&A. So REA bought into both Campaign Agent and Realtair for a combined $20 million. Realtair during COVID merged with Auction Now, so the ability to do online auctions. REA invested into Managed, which is a direct peer to means that you don't need a trust account to manage your property management. Revolutionary idea. Most of the REIs lost their minds when they were told that they wouldn't need trust accounts, but a clever loophole that made that possible. Domain bought into Real-Time Agent, another way of trying to get closer to agents and make it easier for them to handle their sales and marketing. Your bonds are bought into EasyShare, a lot of activity in the property management space going direct to landlord. So as a landlord, do you really need to spend 7% on commissions so that someone can send an email and deal with a broken dishwasher, lift or kitchen door within 3 months, could take 3 months and multiple nagging, or should you actually get that fixed in minutes because you can see it pop up on your app? So a lot of stuff happening in that space. Home Preso was purchased by ActivePipe. I have a deep investment in that one. That was awesome. Multi-million-dollar capital raising in Different, Hutley and Instarent. Again, all money being going into the property management space. Mirvac and Stockland bought into Bricklet, a completely different way of owning property. So do I have to own the whole property, or can I find a couple of friends, or can I even find strangers but actually start to buy bricks? Ray White invested $3 million in Nurture Cloud for their agents. Ray White is the biggest real estate agency group in Australia. And the Proptech Group, fantastic story around the Proptech Group. So my desktop, the boys who started my desktop got bought ages ago by Fairfax. languished there for about 10, 15 years. They didn't do any investment in the technology. They ended up getting made redundant, left Fairfax, went off and started up a whole brand new cloud-based CRM system. And the original founder of one of the original CEOs of REA basically bought them on board and listed on the ASX for 10.6 million. And then they went out and bought My Desktop and then tipped all their clients into Vault. So what's happening, what that means in the real estate space for residential is that the majority of real estate agents in residential are now going to cloud-based CRMs, which is really interesting. So their data will be in their pocket. The idea that they just walk out of an agency with their mobile phone and all of their leads is no longer a risk. Let's have a quick look at market performance during COVID. So we, the property industry had a great COVID. We basically, property prices stayed really strong because volume fell through the floor. So there was not a lot to sell, but what sold for really well, really good prices. That meant that people gained their confidence back in the market quite quickly, and we're seeing volumes of listings up considerably. So the last figures were, I think, 26% growth in listings, although they are still, historically very low. Nationally, home prices in February rose by 4%. I think about 12% is what the number is across the country. And what we saw with COVID was that this flight to the country of people moving to regional areas, because if I can zoom into work and I don't have to join the queue of traffic on the Taronga Freeway or down Victoria Road, why would I? Why can't I just do that twice a week? Well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well do that from the comfort of Ballarat or Bendigo or somewhere else. And we saw a lot of the flight to cloud tech. So what is really amazing about COVID is that when you tell an industry that their option is to adopt technology or shut the door and turn off the lights and not transact, suddenly people become very interested in technology. And so the Proptech industry over that COVID period, especially with the lockdowns in Melbourne, was absolutely smashed with requests for training, for upgrades, and people wanting to understand how to improve their businesses, which was great. Now, what I've done is I've sort of tried to plot on a timeline, and this is very rough, it's a bit of a Kylie Davis guesstimate, on how long some of these technology concepts have been around and operating in the property space. So what we see sort of back in 2011, if not earlier, QR codes, and yet COVID's made us all adopt them. Centralised documentation has been around for a long time. Digital signatures, DocuSign was one of now Reach's most successful investments. Virtual inspections, we've been able to do virtual for quite a long time, and video as a marketing tool has been around for ages, but everyone didn't see why they should bother with it. We also see cloud CRM started to come in around about 2018. Smart buildings have been a thing for quite a while. Email marketing, everyone's known that they needed to do that. And what I've done over the top of this is look at a bit of a bell curve. Now, I know Jonathan's got another bell curve, and I'm going left to right. So what we see is that the innovators right now in real estate are have adopted technology or are in the process of adopting technology that is in transaction platforms. So how do I keep all of the people who have expressed an interest in buying this property up to date instantaneously? And how do I help the winning bidder settle as quickly as possible or as stress-free as possible? So transaction platforms are really doing well. AI is in everything, and yet we resist it. But what we're seeing with the top agents is that they're really embracing it. Energy, so how do I capture the energy in the homes that I'm selling? How do I sell that as a value? What's happening in there? Trust-free accounting, data dashboards, especially in the commercial space. So lots of technology innovation happening in what data is in my building and how do I bring it out and how do I start to manage it. And what we saw during COVID and what we are seeing increasingly now is that the real estate businesses that had adopted technology or had a technology plan in place, when COVID hit, what they did was they accelerated and doubled down on that, whereas everyone else was scrambling to what do I need to do. But what we're seeing now as we come out of it is that those businesses that already had a technology plan in place and had a good Proptech adoption process, those guys are now winning significant market share. So in the residential space especially, what we're now seeing is bigger agencies, a lot more M&As happening around. Agencies will start to be bought because the laggards at the bottom are starting to ask whether it's all worth it and if they can be bothered. So we're seeing those agencies really hit above their weight, those who have adopted innovation. This is exciting because what it means is that innovation is definitely coming through as a way to differentiate yourself in the market and to win more market share. Let's have a look at a couple of quick mega trends and what's going to affect us next. So, changing population. So our population is both younger and older. So I was talking to Nigel Dalton, who used to be at REA on the Proptech podcast, and he was telling me that 83-year-old women by 2030 are going to be basically rule the world, rule Australia. That's pretty awesome. I think I'll be close to that. But what we're seeing is the changing population. So millennials coming through, the property ownership strategy of most millennials is to wait for their parents to die. And that's not okay. So that's influencing the property space. The future of work, we saw this during COVID. We don't need to turn up to the office and present anymore. So how do we manage our work? And all of these things are affecting our office spaces. They're affecting how our homes look, what they look like and presented. We have made the connection between mental health and mental well-being and our built environment. And I was saying to someone before, I think developers are the most awesome people because you guys are the terraformers of how we're going to be living in the future. So you are creating the spaces that have this potential to be extraordinarily balanced between work, home, play, self-expression, community. And the shape of business. So the way that our businesses are operating, how we're making money is changing. It's not just about a single bottom line of cutting as much cost as you can and trying to do as much with as little anymore. We're looking at ways to build, we're moving from transaction to a service economy. We're moving into relationship economy. So all of these things are affecting the technology that you're adopting because you're looking for ways to use the technology to enhance and build the relationships and create clients for life. And this is how this plays out. So what we see around process and efficiency, if you're starting out on a PropTech journey, then basically you're looking for ways to cut costs out of your business and make life less stressful for your staff. So we've seen an awful lot of adoption in the residential space, and we're starting to see this now in the commercial space. We're also seeing that our buildings are, whether we recognise it or not, enormous data gatherers. So, the whole thing about smart buildings and sensors is that they're basically providing data streams to us, and our buildings are actually live data streams, could be live data streams. So as our buildings become more intelligent and the data stream becomes more consistent and understood through that, we see that starts to play in on the process and efficiency that we can start to and how we innovate and improve both the life for our staff and for our teams. And the third biggest challenge that is coming through is this around empowered customers. So we've gone from customers sort of being having a voice to them actually being quite strident about what their needs are, and then not tolerating not having choices anymore. So we no longer have an option of saying, well, yes, I understand, but you see the settlement process is based in Victorian law from sort of 1849. So we have to keep doing it that way. It's not flying any longer if you can order pizza or a car or choose a video based on your mobile phone preferences or have it chosen for you. The property industry needs to really speed up in that space. And as customers become more empowered, the old tools that we've been using to deliver to their expectations becomes almost impossible to execute to a high standard because, and which causes more stress for our team. So that then starts to play into the efficiency and process space. So look, that's it from me. The Proptech Association has been around in Australia since February 25, 2020. We launched just before COVID. We are coming up to our 100th member. Our job is to be a space for the Proptech innovators to come together to talk about innovation and to help agents and the community make better decisions around innovation and technology. And we have our first awards coming up in May, and we'd love to share those results with you when they come through. Who's won?
Thanks, guys, for a wonderful insight to everything that's PropTech. One thing that Kylie didn't touch on is she runs this wonderful podcast. The PropTech podcast, and I had to listen to it the other day, and there's 50 or 60 episodes about all the leaders in the PropTech kind of industry at the moment. I thought, so there's 500 or so PropTech companies in Australia. Well, you're about 10% of the way there, because I think there's 50 episodes. So 450 to go.
That's right, yeah. And by the
Anyway.
time I get there, it'll be.
Well, thank you very much. Now, our second speaker today is Jonathan Hannam. He is a true global citizen, having held senior executive and board roles across Asia and Europe, including being based in Singapore, Philippines, China, United Arab Emirates, Sweden, and Australia, working in real estate, venture capital, technology, and infrastructure-related investments. Now, Jonathan holds an MBA from the University of South Australia and has even studied in the School of Architecture at Tsinghua University in Beijing. Now, in 2015, Jonathan jointly founded Taronga Ventures, which focuses on real estate, venture capital, technology, and fund management across Asia. Please put your hands together for Jonathan Hannam.
Thank you, and it's great to be here today, and thank you to ACBC for hosting this. So I'm going to try and build on Kylie's discussion, and also we're going to start looking at some of the differences between the Australian and the Chinese market as we look at technology. And as we all know, the real estate sector has absolutely changed over the past 12 months. When we first started presenting our business, we used to have the first slide as real estate is changing. But now we can see that with the impacts of COVID, the entire real estate business has completely changed. And the existing players, the question we're saying to ask is, are they also changing? And this is one of our favorite slides. So if you think of any other sector, the finance sector, transportation, media, we've seen a whole range of emerging companies come along and completely disrupt the way that businesses operate. And it doesn't matter if it's the PayPals, the WePays, the Alipays, the banking and finance sector hasn't changed very much, and it needs to start changing in order to compete. A favourite of ours is always the story of Blockbuster and Netflix. Netflix was a small business that began by delivering DVDs. It actually had managed to pivot in around, it was just around 2000, it made this pivot to being an online business. And it managed to get a meeting with Blockbuster. And at the meeting, Blockbuster said, well, we like this. How much would it be to buy your business? And it was $50 million. And at the time, Netflix actually had about $50 million of losses. And the Blockbuster executives laughed and said, thanks very much, see you later. Blockbuster, of course, now is a failed business. And I think Netflix, as of this morning, was about a $232 billion company. So Blockbuster had the chance to buy the business that disrupted it. And how many of us have been faced when we meet these emerging technology companies? Some of the great ones that we're going to hear from today. How many of us have faced a business and seen their proposition and looked at them and said, well, that's not going to impact me? Well, those businesses are coming. And if we think of the real estate sector itself, it is wide open for disruption. And we're seeing it. We're actually seeing billion-dollar businesses emerge across every part of the real estate sector. It doesn't matter if you're in office, resi, hospitality, these emerging businesses that are now, the top two lines are all businesses that have actually emerged that have more than $1 billion valuation. And actually the bottom line is businesses that we've already invested into that are in this space. And we might laugh at a WeWork and think, the business has had some trouble, valuation, they were trying to raise up to $43 billion. They managed to get $8 billion of funding. But that's $8 billion for a business that is actually the same in many ways as a Servcorp or as a Regis that have been around for many years. But the models have shifted. And the real estate sector actually has to change to keep pace. So we think that we're going to see some really interesting companies emerge that will actually disrupt the way that we operate across our entire real estate sector. And we've actually broadened the definition of this space. So as Kylie talks about Proptech, we think that the broader impact of how we move in our cities, the infrastructure, the smart cities approach that many of the new economies are following. So in Singapore, we have a very clear targeted approach to have smart cities. In Tianjin, the city is trying to compete with an eco-city that is a smart city. Cities like Xiamen are trying to reposition themselves to be more attractive to talent as a smart city and to attract some of that talent from Shenzhen and Shanghai. the entire ecosystem that we are now playing with actually gives us a huge amount of deal flow to work with. And we've touched on some of the areas of data. For us, data is everything. It is the oil that will actually drive this next round of the next 10 years. Data is absolutely everything. We also look at mobility. For many of our cities, transport is now becoming a major issue. So there are so many aspects of this that need to be watched. And there are so many companies that are now coming to actually disrupt the space. If we think about the investment globally that has come into the real estate technology sector, it's actually expanding rapidly. And in 2015, when we first set up the business, we actually did a report with KPMG. We made an estimate that the market would reach $20 billion by 2020. We got a lot of press for this. Because we were fairly early. There weren't many funds that were focused on real estate tech. A lot of people laughed at us. We actually hit 20 billion well before 2020. And in the last 18 months, there's been 33 special purpose acquisition companies. We start to hear this term a lot more often, a SPAC. This is businesses that are actually set up to acquire companies. Special purpose vehicles being backed by the major real estate owners, and the amount of capital that's coming is unbelievable. CBRE has their own SPAC, Tishman Speyer, and we're seeing that the real estate companies are gearing up to acquire businesses. And what that means is that the emerging technology investing can expect really good and positive financial outcomes if they can hit a certain rate. And that's driving this market. So any business that can reach a $10 million annual recurring revenue, that's the key target for many of these companies, and larger, of course. So with more capital, we can also expect there's going to be a lot more emerging companies targeting the real estate sector. And Kylie's touched on the residential space, the Australian space as being very large. The actual scale of the real estate sector globally is close to $250 trillion. It is the biggest sector globally, and it's the most open to disruption. And we like it because it's scalable. In many cases, if you have a technology that can impact an office building in Sydney, it can equally impact an office building in Shanghai. It can scale rapidly. And if we think about the sort of trends that we're seeing, so we've touched a little bit already on asset flexibility. And so we're starting to see that councils have to think about the way they plan the cities very differently. The commercial building going forward may need to have a portion of mixed use, more retail, a little bit more of residential. Our planners actually need to change the way they think about the cities to make them work and meet the need of our consumers who are demanding instant gratification. For us, the consumer is everything. So if you're a retail owner, thinking about the experience of your customers in your shopping centre, we're all starting to do it. But if you're not focused on that, you will fail. If you're a commercial owner of real estate and you haven't worked out that your building needs to have 20 to 30% of flexible workspace demands of tenants and customers, then you'll fail. So this is a huge, this asset flexibility is a really big thing for us. How do we build in flexibility with the assets? Globally, sustainability is also becoming a far greater issue for every developer. And the space that we're operating in, we like to invest in technology companies that also have a sustainability outcome as well. And I'll touch on a few of those a little bit later. But the real estate sector is the biggest polluter. It produces more carbon dioxide than any other sector. And therefore we need to change the way that we build our buildings. We need to have better materials. We actually need to think a little bit more before we knock down a building. Because when we waste this asset that's been built, could it have been repurposed into another use? Digital construction is a phenomenal space, and it's that whole issue of scalability. So we talk about an industry that hasn't changed much. The way that we build assets has been very slow to change. The actual digitalization of construction means that we can have a digital twin of an asset. And at some point, when buildings are being sold, people buying the building will say, I want to have that digital twin. I want to have the USB stick that has the full digital development of that building, because that's now a valuable tool. And infrastructure, there's so much development going on with infrastructure at the moment. It's seen as a way to come out of this COVID period. You've got the Victorian government fast-tracking investments if they're creating jobs. So you'll start hearing this term about shovel-ready projects. It's a very, very big driver as we come out of COVID. Now, across Asia, the major corporates are actually getting pretty active. So the biggest investors into real estate technology are actually some of the biggest developers as well. We're very fortunate, we work very closely with groups like Ping An and Vanke. We've had some great visits to China. Ping An is actually driving acceleration through a very, very great program in China, in partnership with groups like Swire. Vanke actually has a $250 million investment in a facility for R&D testing just outside of Shenzhen. And they're testing products. They're actually testing everything from building materials. They're testing the way that wind moves through corridors and buildings. They have actually technology that tests everything down even to heaters that they're putting into their residential apartments. It's a very complete program designed to drive efficiency across the Vanke portfolio. And even in markets like India, we're starting to see major developers are moving into the space. RMZ is one of our partners there. In Singapore, we've seen groups like Jones Lang LaSalle and Lendlease have programs that help support emerging technology companies that are trying to target the real estate sector. And we'll touch on some of our successes with Dexus, with groups like ISPT, one of the biggest superannuation managers based in Melbourne here. These corporates, their boards, their executive teams, they all want to change. The biggest challenge actually remains within the businesses. And so for many of them, the journey is a cultural one as well. So we spend a lot of time trying to help these corporates on that cultural journey. And it's not easy because the development managers have strict timelines, strict budgets, and you bring them a technology that may or may not help them. It's pretty easy to refuse. So what we did was, at Taronga, we actually created an ecosystem to support emerging technology. And over time, it's evolved. So we actually began as an advisory business. I was previously at Mirvac, where I was head of capital, but charged with driving change through one of the major listed developers in Australia. And Mirvac's an innovator. But even within Mirvac, it was a very difficult process to get innovation through the entire business. The advisory part became a service to corporates on how to help them on that journey. We established a fund, and we've had some great successes with the fund, largely because corporates have been willing to back us and to support the emerging technologies that have come through our program. And the last part of our ecosystem is a growth program, which is more of a give back. We hopefully will one day have a profitable or at least break-even growth program, but at the moment we contribute to the ecosystem we're trying to create with a program that we've now supported 22 companies through a program that is focused on capital, customers, and access to new markets. These are a couple of our investors. So we've got a pool of global investors that are supporting us. In Australia, Dexus is the biggest owner of commercial space. Many of you know CBRE, one of the world's largest commercial real estate services firm. Groups that are less known, maybe Patrizia is a major European group. So the idea was that we would bring together a pool of global investors and then start to invest into some really interesting companies. And if we've actually asked many of those corporates, why are they investing into this space? And for many of them, the first step is to actually address the challenges within their existing portfolio. So they want to reduce costs, they want to increase revenues. If it's got a COVID element at the moment, it's also a very positive outcome. Sustainability is now rising as one of their major issues that they're looking to address through technology investment. But then this is also about the future. So what are those future models that will actually disrupt our sector? An insight into a better way of thinking about assets is also becoming a huge part of this. Imagine you're a commercial landlord at the moment. Do you buy another building for $500 million right now when we're a little bit uncertain about the way that the office market is going to perform post-COVID? if you are if you have a fund that's investing into commercial, do you start to think about other sectors as an add-on? And then how do you make sure that your shareholders, your investors, feel that you're at the forefront of a change in technology that is driving this industry? So yeah, we've made 15 investments. We'll have another couple that complete. We're actually an investor in active pipe, which is good. We have about 1,000 companies that we're in active due diligence on, where we are monitoring their performance. We have a fantastic CRM system to help us with that. Our tracking shows around about 500 Australian companies at the moment, but it's growing daily. And those companies, actually, the quality of companies that are coming out of Australia is actually pretty high. So I'll just touch on a couple. So the portfolio at the moment is, we're really pleased with the performance. During COVID, we had no failures, nothing fell apart in our portfolio. In fact, we'll touch on in a moment on how COVID has accelerated the digitalization of real estate. But I might touch on just a couple. So Carbon Cure is probably our highest profile investment. This is a business that is out of North America. They actually inject carbon dioxide into cement, and they embed carbon dioxide into cement. And it's a product that allows the cement through this process to be stronger, and the carbon dioxide is captured. It actually becomes calcium carbonate, so it becomes embedded or sequestered into the cement. And this is actually, this is actually a technology that is now coming into Australia. So we've got Boral and Holcim, two major cement producers, are now working to bring this tech into Australia. It will reduce the carbon dioxide in a development by 5 to 6% today. And within a couple of years, they expect to get to 20% reduction in carbon dioxide. So for every one of the real estate investment trusts that has committed to being carbon neutral by 2028, 2030, this technology becomes a no-brainer. They have to use this type of technology. We were really fortunate with this one. We were the only Asian investor in a round that was 5 times oversubscribed, and our co-investors included Amazon, the Breakthrough Energy Ventures, which is Bill Gates' investment fund. And it was a brilliant investment for us because it's now coming into our market. We're moving it into Singapore as well. Envered's an interesting one. So this is a technology that we first met in Israel in 2016. And it actually came out of the Navy program in Israel. They don't have nuclear submarines, and they needed to find a way to extract carbon dioxide from their air at low temperature to allow their submarines to stay under the water longer. And they perfected a new way of doing air conditioning. And they then patented that. They moved the business to Boston. It's now doing very well in the US. It has over 100 buildings, including some major investment banks that have installed this into their office buildings because firstly, it lowers costs. It improves the quality of the air. But during this COVID period, it's also had significant wellness benefits. The air is much cleaner. It's virus-free. They can tell the tenants that they can return to work safely. It's now coming into Singapore. We're working with both Dexus and ISPT to bring this one into Australia as well. But it's this sort of technology. It's a new way of doing air conditioning, and it reduces your energy costs by 20%. So it's one of those, for us, it seems like a no-brainer. Perhaps I'm happy to cover any of these, but open space is another digital one that is changing the way that the development of buildings. In every building, a development manager will wander the site. They have a camera on their helmet, and it tracks live the level of construction and creates a digital image that is compared to the building modeling. So it creates a digital record of construction. So this gives you a flavour of the types of businesses. Maybe a Melbourne-based one, so Ground Floor, absolutely killing it. This is a business that does smart delivery of packages. So during the COVID period, we had this, actually the state government insisted that packages be contactless for delivery. And this is a technology that uses basically a QR code to allow parcel delivery to be much more efficient. But yeah, the fund, we'll have 3 more hopefully by the end of this month. And moving to some of the questions that we've had prior to this. So what is the impact of COVID on the space? We've had this curve. I think what the key message here, and this is actually a room service in Hangzhou being delivered by robot. This is about 3 years ago. It was already standard in China, and China's moving at a much greater rate to some of the Australian hotels. And delivery of food is actually the biggest problem in many of the hotels from a service point of view. But we've got this same curve, and what's really happened is that innovation has been fast-tracked during this period, and there's actually barriers to resistance in many cases have just been removed because the owners of the buildings have worked out that they need to change, they need to act. So it's been quite a positive period for that. We've got a little bit of research here. So if we think of the actual impact of working from home, and this is from the US showing different sectors and the impact of people working from home during COVID. So across many of these sectors, there's a huge amount of people that have decided that working from home during this period is safer. And now we've got this period now in Australia where we're trying to get people to come back to work. Really interesting. So Shanghai is already at 99% of office workers back. But Perth, which hasn't even had it's had very few cases of COVID, they're only at 67%. So how do owners of real estate change when even in a market where there hasn't been COVID, the customer is telling us they want to work from home? I don't have the answer to this one yet. And then if we think of retail, so retail was already in trouble. So online spending was already a major issue in retail. So many of the owners of shopping centres were starting that journey of change. But actually during COVID, certain sectors doubled their online presence. So grocery shopping has doubled during this period online. How many people will going back to their normal supermarket when COVID's over? The biggest one is banking. We're now at 73% penetration for online. And you'll start to see bank branches closing. Even Hampton, ANZ's gone. Bank branches everywhere are starting to close. So if you're an owner of a shopping centre and you've got a few banks, you can expect that they'll be leaving you shortly. Maybe the last one is actually the biggest challenge of all. And this is one that's coming. This was 2018. We were very pleased to be welcomed to Alibaba. We had a great inspection. Alibaba is actually a pretty interesting company. There's about 2,000 people working in real estate technology. They used to do it for their own, they actually had a business that has now been created that is driving technology change to their own portfolio because it's so large. But they are becoming a real estate player. They have far greater information on the retail spend of Chinese shoppers than any developer in China. They know what people are buying, they know when and why they're buying it. And they can actually predict that. We've also seen the same with Microsoft. So many of you that use Microsoft Office will start to see Microsoft Analytics pop up. Every week you get a little prompt saying, this is who you've been collaborating with. So Microsoft actually knows who you work well with. At what point does Microsoft come to a major tenant, such as Deloitte, and say, we know that your teams are spread out over 7 locations. You actually could have all of your office in one location and reduce your costs. They have that technology. It's only a matter of time. And how will the commercial owners respond to that? A really fascinating part of our growth program, we had Stephen Sheila, the former head of Facebook Australia New Zealand, speak to all of our corporate partners. And he asked them, if you could understand one thing about your customer, and this is some of the major owners of real estate in Australia, if you could understand one thing, what would it be? And people were saying, I'd like to know if their business is doing well. I'd like to know if they're going to sign a new lease or if they're hiring. He said, I want to know one thing. It's everything. And actually I did. I knew everything about every employee that was coming to my offices because I've got their Facebook feed. So the technology companies are the biggest challenge in this space. What are we seeing? So some of the trends. So of those companies that we've talked about, the 1,000 ecosystem, and we had 300 apply to the last growth program. So customer experience is the biggest focus for us now. Everything is about the customer. we talked about the rise of sustainability, and this is being driven by investors. Investors are demanding more focus on sustainability. Data collection, efficiency, and actually a big one in Australia is better and safer construction. So it's not really well known, but we have about 185 deaths per year in the construction industry. A number of those are in mining, they're classified together, but 185 deaths that shouldn't happen. So the focus on construction and safety is a big one. I thought I'd bring another company into this. So this is a business that starts to show some of the differences between Australia and China. This is actually a Chinese business that we didn't invest into. We did a lot of work on it. It's actually live in about 50 shopping centres in China. It's a facial recognition technology business that allows you to track a shopper as they arrive at the shopping centre. You know who they are and you track them and you promote product to them based on their spending patterns. And this is killing it in China. They've gone very quickly from 1 mall to 20 malls to 50 malls. We would love to think that at some point we'll be able to bring this business out of China. But at the moment, there are privacy considerations. There are issues in certainly every market has different rules with privacy. But this is the type of technology that actually can lead to a customer being delighted. But it also has the negative of the privacy control. So this is an example of some of the things that it's starting to see different from Australia and China. And there's quite a few. So this is also in part to help Ben with the panel. But in China, what we're seeing is that the major corporates are actually more willing to act. So they're investing into, they're actually putting a lot of money. I mean, Vanke to put $250 million into technology. The same with Alibaba. And also the foreign developers that are in China, Capital Land, Keppel. These are major groups that are investing large sums of money into innovation and technology. The biggest issue for most companies that want to go into China is the use of China Cloud and whether or not you can control your IP. Obviously, China has the more relaxed rules with facial tech. The other part is that the valuations in China, because of the scale of the market, are really high. So in many of the businesses we look for fundamentals. We look for revenue. We look for, at what point they're going to break even. The Chinese businesses scale up very quickly. And then there's issues of currency. There is a far greater use of robotics than so even Vanke as a developer is using robots to assist them with security. And many people would think that you've got a lower cost of labor, but they've moved very quickly from a labor issue to actually the data that is driven from that. And that is actually a more valuable tool for them that's generated through robotics. And then there's smart cities that are emerging. There's so many of them, and they're competing for talent. Australian corporates are starting the journey. It's taken time, some of them more reluctantly than others, but I think some of the major institutions are now embracing this. And those that don't will get left behind, there's no doubt. So there is going to be a lot of disruption in the space. One of the issues for Chinese tech companies coming to Australia is that they actually think the market's very small. And so for them to come to Australia, they might as well expand into a new province. They're actually looking to the US. And so we see that a lot of the companies that we would like to bring here just think the market is too small. We've touched on the privacy. We've also touched on this issue of scale-up capital. So there is a lack of funding still in Australia. And so we have a lot of early stage capital or angel investing, where people are actually putting their own money to start ventures. But we seem to fall off as we sort of scale these businesses. And that's something that really needs to be improved in the Australian market. And then there is a drive now within the state governments, Victoria, New South Wales, they're all trying to drive jobs. And so any technology or innovation that actually is also employing people, that's actually going to get a lot of support from the state governments. So that's a bit of a snapshot. We'll be around for questions later, but I'll hand back to Ben for now. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jonathan, for a wonderful insight into in everything PropTech. It's really exciting to see that obviously there's a lot of opportunity for Australia. A lot of other countries, particularly China, are going really fast. So I guess there's just a lot of opportunity in the short-term future. Now, our third speaker is Kenny Lee. Now, Kenny specialises in corporate, immigration, blockchain, and commercial law. He's an extremely accomplished entrepreneur and business owner, having founded and managed many successful businesses over the years. Kenny is the CEO of STAX, and notably in 2020 helped secure the first ever crypto-funded IPO in Australian history, paving the way for more Australian companies to access new investor and asset classes. So please put your hands together for Kenny Lee.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenny Lee. That's a typo. Looked a bit different on my computer. But anyway, thanks for coming here. And thank you, ACBC, for organizing this event, for YepHome for sponsoring as well. I'll introduce a bit of STAX later, but I just want to leverage on Jonathan's slide about comparing Australia and China and how Australia is losing on the startup capital scalability issue, access to funding. So that is how it all came about, STAX. I'm a lawyer by trade. Since 2012, I did a lot of corporate advisory, dabbled a lot of blockchain, ICO, IAO, I did a whole lot, over 30 projects. What I did see though, is that funding overseas was a lot easier than funding in Australia, gathering funding, getting money and etc. But we are in Australia and I love Australia, so what do we do? So I thought, look, we need a bridge. There is a lot of money outside. At that time, 2017, cryptocurrency became a really popular item. Everyone wanted to have a Bitcoin. It was, our digital assets director will explain more about that later, but we do not see cryptocurrency as a speculative or an investment, but a transfer of value. So we really leverage on stable tokens. So I'll explain why later. So I'll talk about the opportunity, what we do, bit of case studies, and blockchain in the real estate market. The opportunity. So how do we make a traditional asset, real estate, houses, businesses, versus alternative class assets, cryptocurrency merge? We saw STAX as a bridge. So what we felt was a lot of retail investors were locked out because of funding requirements, regulations from good opportunities that they otherwise would have access to. It's normally reserved for wholesale investors, significant investors. So we're looking at how we can break down that barrier. So breaking down barriers became part of our larger vision. We leverage on cryptocurrency, blockchain technologies. We want equity all around, everyone being able to access equity, access good capital, businesses getting capital, investors getting to partake in capital raising rounds. And more importantly, we only want good businesses on our platform. So we can speak more about the opportunities later. This is our vision. So it is to be the world-leading platform for investors globally to access investment opportunities. Because Australia being an island, we want to build a bridge to the world so money can come in and money can go out, flow in and out. We really focus on the primary market and secondary market. Those are our core two businesses. The primary market really looks at capital raising for businesses, for projects, for opportunities. The secondary market is something we're launching in the next week or two. That is access to a number of stock exchanges in Australia where people are able to buy using cryptocurrency. We act as that broker. What we want to do, the next step, is allow overseas capital to flow in using cryptocurrency into buying Australian shares and equity as well. So that is the whole big play for our secondary market. So in terms of primary market, which is a bit more relevant to the topic today of property, we have a equity crowdfunding or a CSF license by ASIC. allowing us to raise money for pre-revenue businesses and projects from retail and wholesale. We have non-listing raises or private placements. We assist clients from overseas and local to raise money, and for IPO raises, which is allowing companies to list on, we partner with Sydney Stock Exchange, but any stock exchange, and being able to raise or do their rounds and accept crypto. So we provide the rails. So a bit about our success, our previous achievements. We'll start with Everlast. Everlast is an Australian company who was the owner or had license to produce Everlast drinks. We were able to secure $5 million funding. We facilitated that using a bit of cryptocurrency and traditional cash from overseas investors. But more notable is the West Coast Aquaculture, the WCA. It's listed on the Sydney Stock Exchange. They came to us a number of years, about 2 years ago, looking to raise about $5 million. So what was interesting about this is we worked with ASIC for about 8 to 12 months. And we were able to convince ASIC to allow us to raise under prospectus with cryptocurrency as a mode of investment. What that meant was that you do not need AUD anymore. You can use USDT and you can invest directly into a project and you get your shares issued under that. So there is no traditional fiat. When we did the raise, we got filled pretty fast, a couple of weeks. If full retail, it wasn't underwritten, there was no backers. What we found out though, which proved what we believe is right, is that as a transfer for value, 90% of money raised was actually in cryptocurrency, coming from China, Malaysia, Thailand, Singapore, a bit of Australian, and most of the Australian investors, they invested with cash. What that led us, that came back to the initial thought about how cryptocurrency can be a good mode of transaction. And this could be used and applied in real estate as well. As you know, a lot of times we have issues with moving money across borders. So cryptocurrency can be one of them, and it's all done properly. We have relevant licenses. We have a digital currency exchange registration. We have our AFSLs and etc. So if there's anyone interested, we can have a chat later. But bringing down into how Proptech is relevant, it's how we can use cryptocurrency and blockchain as the application for real estate. I want to invite Tony Fan, who's our digital assets director. So he's our crypto expert.
Sorry guys, a bit of technical difficulty here with using a new one, but it's local. You guys hear me properly? Oh, good. Okay. Yep. So I suppose just to start off, I just want to gauge a bit of interest in the crowd. Who here knows how much one Bitcoin is worth? All right, we've got 2 people, 3 people. Okay. Throw a price at me.
56
US. That was yesterday's price. All right, so 59,000 right now US dollars. Okay. Now this came from an early high at 2017 of about $20,000 till now, which is become such an asset that I think are being embraced by institutions. It's very much legitimized. Okay. So what I want to draw attention to is that being an asset class that is quite valuable now, but also what's underneath the DeFi platforms, right? So decentralized finance, there's locked finance of over $45 billion. As of a year ago, that's less than 1 billion. So just as entrepreneurs, as business owners, as developers, right? You probably want to know why this is happening, right? Why is liquidity moving so quickly into an asset class such as this, and how you can benefit to give your clients value, right? So if there's one thing I want you to walk out of here with, and that is cryptocurrency is not a way to launder money and all that. It can be used that way, so can gold and cash, right? But I want you to understand that it's a weapon that you can take in your arsenal and use that as the world's ever changing. Just embrace it a little bit, because what I'm going to introduce to you is something a little bit different on how to finance property, for example. So traditional ways of financing property is obviously you have a piece of land. You obviously want to put a high-rise tower on there. You've gone through and got all kinds of permits, all kinds of licensing required to do that. But then it comes to financing. And there are a couple of things that people look for, right? Especially banks. How much is it worth? Yeah. and also how much pre-sales have you got. Those two things determine your rate, determine how much I'll lend to you, etc., etc. And that's fine. That's them taking it on their book, so they need to understand the risks, right? Now, well, after you've done that, you can then go to the bank, go to private lenders, go to mezzanine financing, and get your financing traditionally. But it's very costly and it takes a lot of time a lot of times. So add another thing under that, which is decentralized finance, which is a way you can finance real property structured properly and go to almost the world for financing. Like I said before, the industry is growing massively, right? We know that 1 billion to 45 billion is not an easy feat to achieve. Why don't we try to tap into that? I mean, would anyone want some additional liquidity to the pools that you guys have already? Have a think about that, because that's a powerful weapon to have in your arsenal when the time comes to talk about it. The other thing I want to introduce to you is obviously the tokenization of real world assets, okay? So especially property. Now, property tokenization doesn't work for every kind of property, but you can tokenize it under the correct structure and advice. And that's something, if you're interested in, please come up, have a chat with us, because we'd love to just educate people on more on what they can do with this kind of stuff. The other thing is obviously with investors, with business owners, there's your cash flow concerns or things like that. But ultimately, if you have a quality property and you have the ability to market that, why not market it to the world instead of limited pools such as banks or your private lenders that are currently servicing you? And the rates are relatively competitive. So really think about that. I suppose that's a little bit of introductions on what we can do and how we can sort of assist you. But if you do have any questions, please come to us afterwards, after this presentation, or if you're really game, ask me right now. If you want, ask me. Otherwise, or if you have any questions for Kenny, I'll pull them straight back up here. Otherwise, I'll leave you guys to it. Thank you so much.
Kenny and Tony, thank you very much. I've got a development actually coming up, so maybe we can have a chat about how we can finance it soon. Thank you. Okay, and now for our fourth and final speaker, we have Tony Shen. Now, Tony is the co-founder and managing director of YepHome and brings over 2 decades of experience in property and technology industry. A technologist at heart, Tony has an intimate understanding of what makes real estate tick and specialises in investment, data analysis and marketing across all property classes in Australia and abroad. Tony's success in the real estate industry, coupled with his global vision to help streamline the outdated traditional approach to purchasing a property, has been a driving force behind the creation of YepHome. But I'll let Tony tell you in a bit more detail. Beautiful. Put your hands together for Tony Shen.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a very pleasure to be here. Thanks, Virginia. Thanks for Katie, and thanks for Jonathan, and also for Kenny and Tony. A very exciting speech. Yeah, so maybe I just roughly introduce by myself. My name is Tony Shen, is co-founder of YepHome. I've been here in Australia for over 15 years. So when I come to Australia first of probably 2004. So my background was the IT people. So I'm the coding to do the the Java, J2E, ERP the systems. But when I come to Australia to have a look around, so what kind of industry probably I will be involved. So I do a lot of research. Finally, I found maybe the property industry is a good choice. So since then, I spent over nearly 15 years in the property industry. Yeah, this is my background. Yeah, before I start these things, thanks for Kelly having all the overview for the Australian property market. So I was just talking about the Proptech waves. A lot of people think of Proptech. When it started for Proptech? Actually, for the first wave, it took place in the middle 1980s there. So the key driving of this kind of things was introduced by the personal computer and also the associated softwares like the spreadsheet and also like Excel. In that time, the people used this kind of software to analyze all the data in there. So after that, we call this one is Proptech 1.0 initially. And between the Proptech 1.0 to 2.0, we have a bridge. In that space, we call online residential market space. In memory, like RaceSaver.com.au established in 1996. So in that way, it's between Proptech 1.0 to 2.0. So I list some of the elements in here, the core driven by the like the coding computing and also the mobile internet, and also the letter coding, also the high-speed broadband. So in the 2012 is most likely people use the smartphone. So this is given another hard driving for the like the economists and also for the PropTech, got a very, very strong development in that period. We come to 2008, we can see there's a lot of the exposure for the PropTech company happening in that period of times. But after GFC, a lot of people and a lot of companies have disappeared. Right now, we come to the PropTech we call the 3.0. This is probably will be driven by the IoT and also the AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. And also, we will see the blockchain, the Tony have already shared before, the blockchain will be in the future. So this is where we come across in another 4 or 5 years. So blockchain technology and the tokenization probably will be more popular. And the probably I will share with you guys as the start company with PropTech. So what's the point of view and which area we are focused on? And how if the people want to enter the PropTech industry, which part of it they're probably going to choose? Because this is a variety the sector they can choose from the PropTech part. You can do like the smart homing, smart building, 3D building, this kind of things. But when we come to the Australian, like being here over 15 years, we saw something still not change. What first comes to Australian, I used like a register.com.au. Right now, I still use that platform, but not too much changing in this platform. And also, this is the will be showing in the Australian. The total value of the Australian asset will be 7 trillion. Katie having updated is 7.6 trillion for the total asset in Australia for the property market. But for the off the plan market, we have like a total 120 million. This is still very huge market there. But a lot of the like local people, they're probably more focused on established market, not off the plan market. So we can see a lot of the potential in this part. And also every year, so what do we need? We need like the 197, it's near 200 property delivery every year. So right now, like the existing market, the property transaction will be nearly 500,000, this kind of transaction. But for the off the plan, we still have huge demand in there. For example, I give you some example in Melbourne. Right now, we have like a 5.2 population in Melbourne. But in the next 10 years, we probably will be achieving 6.2 million population in Melbourne. So in the next 10 years, we will increase 1 million population. These people is going to buy existing property or they're going to buy off the plan or brand new properties. This is the question. This is the, I think like the developers, urban designers, and the bankers need to analyze. So we found like this industry still got a very, very space to move. And it comes of a positioning. So when we, as the startup, like a public company, we have to choose the area we're going to. We need to analyze what are existing company on the market at the moment. What are they doing now? What they can do, what they cannot do. So in this map, we can show, this is a few company on the market at the moment, like the iBuyNew, Urban, similar like the market space platform. And we're also gonna develop ID Investory. This is kind of like a B2B business. We're also gonna like a more existing established business, IEA, Domain, Harmony. Harmony is the grow very faster. And also we have a CRM system, very famous one like Agentsbox and also Box.this. But none of these have really integrate like the developers, agents, clients. They all most like the B2B or B2C model. So business model, to be honest, I haven't seen like the last 10 years, not too much changing in this industry, particularly in like the off-the-plan markets. So when we have already do a lot of deep analysis, we found that this is a good opportunity to enter this market. So based my experience and also we found that this is a lot of the panic for all the stakeholders. Like, for example, I give you a sample. If something like a client, it doesn't matter you're a local client or overseas client, we're going to find some like the existing property, okay, you just go straight away to the auction market. Okay, I can have a look, I can touch, I can find, I can do a lot of the inspection things. But when you come to off the plan market, it's nothing going to have a look. It's a piece of landing there. It's just the people working there. You just look at the floor plans. You have the imagination for your, what you're going to pitch, what it's going to look like, where it's going to finish. This is still a lot of things. So lack of like a transparency. So when the people buy the things, they cannot find what actually I can get. There's a still bigger gap. In the last 50 years, nothing changed in this part. And also, I'm familiar with the local policy guidelines and rules. For the local people, should be no problem. But some people, so how can I get like the first grant? How can I get a builder grant? This kind of things. How can I get a home loan? This kind of things. Some people maybe know, some people maybe not. For the overseas people, they have no idea. It all depends on like the agent. Maybe it's a local agent, maybe an overseas agent to tell them, okay, what's this will be going, what's going to be changed. We also found a lot of case study. You know, some people, for example, that purchase from overseas, doesn't matter these people in Singapore, Malaysia, Hong Kong, or mainland China. They maybe don't know they have paid extra overseas stamp duty in Australia. This is charged for further, further fees become things. Because like, sometimes the overseas agents, they don't want to sell. So this also the customer part, they got a very panic. So this is also very in fact for existing market. To be honest, in Melbourne, we have already do the silence of the owner-occupier and investors. We found a lot of people that panic at the moment because this is the lack of transparency, also not familiar for the local policies. And also minimize for the other service. When you purchase, for example, when you purchase from overseas, who is going to serve you? The developer or agency? Maybe initially the agent will do the service, but after that, it's difficult for the people to follow up. And for the agent's part always, for the existing property and off the plan market is different, totally different. For the existing market, second-hand property market, it's always like I want to get a listing. I'm sorry for the vendor. I want to get a listing. When I get a listing, I can sell. I open for inspection. I can sell. So for existing market, the agents always service for the vendor. They get best vendor because they want to show the highest bidder, highest selling price, so they can get another listing. But for the off the plan, so normally you have to do the best service for your client, no matter it's local or overseas, you have to do a lot of the service for them. But the lack of the clients, this is the very painful the existing sales agent, especially for the off the plan market. So they need to do the best service to attract the client, get a referral maybe in the future, maybe this people can bring his friend or whatever to buy another one. So this is the difference. And also we found that this kind of agents, they do not have any like the real visibility of transaction and the data platform, especially for the property analysis. And also this kind of people haven't got enough support for the data, especially for analyze the behavior. Why these people going to buy? Why these local people buy? Why is the overseas going to buy? So we need like the customer behavior analysis. So this is kind of a local agent or overseas agent. They need to think about it. Okay, we come back to the developer part. Some people thinking, okay, developer part is good. I'm the developer. I'm the strong guy. I can make a lot of money. But unfortunately, I can share this experience with you guys. In the last 2 or 3 years, we have seen a lot of the developers, especially in the off-the-plan market, they got struggling, they got a big issue. Because this kind of developers, when they building this construction properties, they haven't realized in the future how they can control the risk control with their own clients. Because Australia compared with China is different. Like in China, when we buy the property, normally in 2 or 3 months, this kind of people, they pay off, and then they get a bank loan. So for the developers, it's easy to control the risk. But in Australia, normally the developers, they only can receive 10% of the deposits. The rest of money, they have to waiting for 2, 3, 4, 5 years and the settlement. But if this kind of people cannot settle, they get a big risk. And if they cannot sell like 10 or 20% of the rest of their stock, they're not going to make money, especially in Melbourne. They got a huge risk. And also a lot of developers, especially for the medium-sized developers, they do not have powerful systematic like the system to handle the sale process. This is also the big troubles for them, because if they cannot control their sale process, how they can control in settlement. And also for the data part, so for the developer, when they just launch for one project, sometimes they do the marketing research and good things, but some might not. They think, okay, I just design good building. I have very good architecture designer. I have very good interior designer. I have very good location. It should be okay to sell, but which agent you engage for? Which agent you charge? There's no record on the market. So this is also a big issue, big pain point for the existing developers, doesn't matter in the Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane. So come across this kind of things, we decided to build a new, we call ecosystem for the off-the-plan market. In this ecosystem, so like Kelly shared before, is in the first stage, we probably focus on like the modular transaction. This transaction can be happen offline or can be happen online. The beautiful things for this one, so we have built like the circle for these 3 major stakeholder or parties. But in the future, we can bring more parties involved. So in this model, so developers, when they develop some project, they can publish their listing, doesn't matter it's on the market or off the market. They can upload their all the listing on our portal. So the agency can have looked all the details, because the agents need to be professional training. A lot happened we found is like the agents lack the training because they haven't got enough the support, especially from the developer part. Is developer not just give you the stock, okay? You just make it sell. The developers always have to get more support from agency. But if you do not have like a platform to support you, get enough support for the agency, this cannot be working for longer. And for the agents part, when they get like the access to our platform, they can choose which project or which products they are more confident. And this kind of agents, especially for like the small agents, they may just have like a 6, 5, 10 people. They're still very small agents. This kind of agents, they cannot build their own CRM system, because normally you have to spend like 100,000, even more, to work out, to customize your sales, like something like a Salesforce CRM system. Small agent always use Excel spreadsheet. It's not efficiency, even sometimes out of control. Some people leave and some people cannot handle. So when these agents working in this system, they can just easy to access all the project, and all his staff get fully support, fully training. They totally understand it doesn't matter your staff in the locally or overseas. And the beautiful thing for the customer part, when the customer visits or visit our platform, it's very clearly to show them, because some customers maybe know, okay, I'm just going to buy something, but I have no idea. So what kind of property is probably suitable for me? Probably so my budget is just $500,000. My budget is just 600,000, maybe not above. So for this kind of people, they just come to the market. It's very beautiful then to use our search engine to find good things for them. In the future, we have the AI to match for products to them. Or in the future, when we get new products to launch, we will remind him. So this is a new project to launch in which suburb, in the Point Cook, in the Doncaster, whatever, in the Sydney, Box Hill, Roskilde, whatever. So easy to match with the demand for the customers. And for another part is easy to find which agent is qualified, because for off the plan market, there's not too many agents. It's not like a realestate.com.au. You show the agents, you got details, how many exist property this agent has sold. In off the plan market, there's no data to show this agent is qualified and how many record, how many people have reserved for customers. There's no data at the moment. And also for the market order work. So what does that mean? Because when the people are going to buy something off the plan, you always have to do the more detailed research compared with the existing market. So when you're doing a lot of the research using our platform, you can find more details. You can through the 100 or 1,000 projects, you can choose the better suitable for you. So this is different where we help a lot of the first-time buyers, investors, doesn't matter overseas, and local people to enter this market. So that's why we are focused on to do the off-the-plan market, because we are thinking this area is got huge opportunities. And also for another part, we're gonna generate the bigger data. The bigger data, like Jonathan said, is key in the future. Why is the bigger data is the key in the future? When we analyze the customer behavior, agents behavior, and even for the developers behavior, and we can easily analyze when the developer buy the land, it's not only depends on, okay, what's the valuation for the land, what's the feasibility, this land is valuable to do the project or not. It's always have to match demands and the supply. This is a market. So when the developers do the end of the project in the future, if they can access or connect to our platform, it's easy to show them. So where this area, the demand is from the local, from the overseas. How many invest in this area? How many occupy in this area? How many downsize people in this area? So this is a lack of data. So we need to use the data, bigger data to analyze. And in the potentially, another thing maybe also share, a lot of the developers spend a lot of money on the on-site display room. But potentially, this is going to be changed. This is where in the upgrade stage. So the developers can use VR technology. I think since the last 12 months, a lot of things happened. one of the things we can see, the virtuality have already been more popular compared with 4 or 5 years ago. A lot of people that are made in the local, overseas, internationally, they use the VR technology. Even we call right now some of the mixed realities. In our ecosystem, so developers will be listing management, agents will be do browse available project, online promotion, and after sales, this is the sales agent management. We got a leads contact management, and we got a sale workflow performance, everything. And for the bigger data, we also get like the use behavior, sort of profile, industry reports, price prediction. And for the sales service and the potential, like I mentioned before, for the property real estate industry, the liquidity is very important. So that's in the next stage, we call maybe the 3.0, 4.0, we'll consider to do tokenization for the old asset. This is will be bigger evolution for the whole industry. And for the customer part, we definitely will be add more value to the customer part. It's efficiency. How convenient for the conveyancing, transfer money, this kind of things. And how our platform will be in the future will be based on the blockchain. This is very exciting and give a lot of chance, a lot of space to imagination in the future. So this is will be different data driven and also like the high tech knowledge. And also in the future, we also can accept capital currency, tokenization, this kind of things. And then the final part, we're from the Proptech 3.0 move to the Proptech 4.0. This will be happen maybe the 2025. It's coming. The future is coming. So right now we're just doing maybe just connect the developers, agents, and the customers. In the future, we probably will be share this information or connect the different parties. Like we can connect it with the bank, use open banking, use API to connect it with open banking. So this is will be help or assistant the customers analyze their behavior or easily, quickly to give the loan approved in the future. Not spend too long, like some customers spend like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, even longer time to get a loan. Use the open banking, 5 minutes. You get a loan very faster. Evaluation. This is also, I just want to mention, evaluation is very important because for example, if some people purchased property 2 or 3, 4 years ago, it's off the plan. But right now, the valuer company, maybe valuer just use the existing database, use the core logic or use their own database, but they haven't get a collection for the selling price. They compare with existing, maybe this building is built in another 10 or 15 years ago. But how can you compare or use this kind of the value to compare with off the plan value? It's very different. So that's why a lot of the plan value are a little bit low at the moment. This is not fair. So this is the one way when we collect enough information. So this will be help like the bank or valuation company to get a more correct value. And in the future, the bit of things we also can use the smart contract. The smart contract right now have already used for variety industry. This will be happening in real estate industry, and we think this is another key point to driving property technology from 3.0 to 4.0. Okay, I think just to share some information with our audience, and thank you everyone, and hope to enjoy this function. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. That's fantastic. Well, we've had our 4 speakers speak, and now I'm going to ask them all to jump up here. We've got a panel discussion. Now, it was going to be half an hour. Because of time, it's going to be shortened a little bit, so we'll try and keep our answers really succinct. But Tony, actually, I'll leave that with you to start. And with Kylie, Jonathan, Kenny, jump up. So Tony, I'll start with you. I'm really interested about YepHome. I spend way too much time on applications looking at properties. It's like an addiction. You know how they talk about gaming addictions? Well, I've got the property addiction. You know, every night, the amount of time just scrolling through. So I'm really excited to see what YepHome has to offer. I guess simply, how is it going to change my life as a buyer and then also my life as a developer in, say, 6 months or 12 months time, but then also longer term?
Okay, thanks, Ben. It's very good questions. Happy you can find a good property on our platform. Yes, I think we hope so in the future. So what this platform can bring, like the efficiency to the, we are more targeted, like first-time buyers, investors, especially they are looking for something off the plan or brand new properties. So this is more convenient to compare with some like existing platform. I think we can deeply to get like the more information, like for the clients when they buy something, and also we can use the AI to match, help the client to find the efficient way to find which property is suitable for them. And also the beautiful things in the future. So what we also can do. So when the people just maybe log in or sign it with our platform, it will be automatically, so they're going to remind, oh, we got this kind of property. If you set your budgeting there, your preference in there, your the area, everything, environment, this kind of things you can set up. The system will be automatically sending a message, which kind of property is suitable for you. And you probably can help you to find a good like a space or property, like the investor probably offer some buyer to get in this.
And Tony, so how does that compare with, I guess, what's available at the moment? I know there's two main competitors, realestate.com.au and Domain, of which I spend a lot of time on them at the moment. But how does YepHome's compare with those two?
Yeah, I think like the demand is the real estate. They're good. They've been this industry for a long time. Yeah. So I think compared with them, we still got a few advantages at the moment. First of all, I think this is two major platforms. They are most focused on like the existing property markets. So it's like a more show the clients for the existing properties, the photos, some use the 3D metapod, this kind of things. But for the offer plan, especially for a brand new, they haven't done too much for this area. So we can do much deeper. So in the late this month, we're going to launch like a virtual display room online. So this is probably going to help like the developers and also buyers 24 hours to online to visualize, to the display room. You're not like going to on-site because this is off the plan. This is different. And another thing is compared with the existing platform, we also found that this is not user-friendly. When you just visit like the IEA or domain, it always asks you to leave your message, send your message. I will respond very soon. But how long will we give a response? Sometimes it's short, sometimes longer. So beautiful things for us in the future. We have like AI service, 24 hours. It's be machine learning and training. It can answer question 24 hours. So this is can through the questions, everything straight away. And we also get an online connection for all the agency. They also can online respond to all very quickly. So it will be system automatic. Sometimes it's like a Uber. The system where we choose which the consultant is more experienced in this area, in this project, is automatically recommending to this potential client. So it's probably like the straight away response. This is I think it will be designed very friendly for the customer part. Yes.
Beautiful. I'm very excited to see YepHome's in action. Now I might handball it on to Kylie, so
okay,
just pass the mic along. Kylie, I know Proptech, I'm sure for a lot of people, was a little bit confronting, particularly given people like the way that they do things. And you touched on this in your speech, but for, say, the average, maybe for the average property investor, the average developer, and the average property consultant, what's your recommendation for the first step, I guess, in terms of jumping into the property scene and adopting things that can, I guess, change the way that you work straight away?
Yeah. So I think the worst thing you can do is try and understand everything that's out there and then make a decision. The thing that you actually need to do, and it probably sounds a little bit counterintuitive coming from a Proptech person, but it's don't think about the tech. Think about your customers and think about the pain points that your staff have or that your team has in delivering an amazing experience to those customers. And if you get really clear on what the problems are that you're trying to solve, you can then assess the technology that is out there through that lens and decide what is going to fix those problems the easiest. If you take the view that you need to understand the whole market and then assess everyone individually, you'll drive yourself crazy. But if you go back to the human side of it and look at those amazing customer experiences that we want everyone to happen, it starts to become a lot simpler when you're looking at the options and seeing if they'll fix that pain.
I think that's good, because when you see on a board 500 different PropTech companies, it can be really straight away, you get taken back a bit where to start, and they've all got, jazzy names and everything, but so start with the customer, what's not working, and then kind of find the PropTech.
Yeah, and so ask yourself, what are the things in your business where you get the most complaints? And where are the things that you get in your business, whether you're an agent or whether you're a developer or a builder or anything, where do you get your most customer complaints? And then where do you get the most feedback from your staff about my customers are stupid, I don't know what they're talking about, and it's really hard to deliver to that expectation. So find those pain points as well. And then when you actually then start to look at the tech, you'll find that what solves one will solve the other. And if you frame it in that way too, it's not about, hey, the bosses have this great idea, we're going to introduce this tech and impose it on your entire team. It's actually, how that is really painful for you and you hate doing that. We're going to fix that, we're going to take that pain away. And then the technology adoption and the change management side of it starts to become a lot more positive because you're actually, making life easier for people, not imposing something on them.
Okay, and Kylie, actually, I also read somewhere that, can you speak 4 different languages?
I speak Danish, German, and I can understand French, but German and Danish get in the way, so I'm not very good at French.
Can you speak I guess we are the Australia-China Business Council. Can you speak any Chinese?
Ni hao, that's about,
What's another word? Fang's, it means apartment or house. That'd be a
I
good
have
one.
been to China a couple of times and I used to know the word for 2 beers, but I can't remember that anymore.
All you need to know is Tai Guela. It's very expensive. Thanks, Kylie. I might pass it on to Jonathan now. Now, Jonathan, you touched on, I guess, the speed that things are, or the momentum that the PropTech industry has at the moment. And could you kind of touch on a little bit more about why do you think, particularly in Australia, we've been slow to adopt PropTech and how that compares, I guess, with China and other countries that are really leading the PropTech scene?
Yeah, it's a question that we debate and we go back and forth on. So I think the reason that it's been slower in Australia is that we have a very sophisticated market already, and the market is quite regulated. So we have quite heavy regulation with construction, we have trade unions, we have sophisticated players. So the actual processes that are already there aren't really designed to allow for agile businesses that are moving to resolve quite specific issues that arise. So it takes actually an organization to start thinking a little bit differently. And if we take any major development, so the best case study we have in Sydney is actually the International Towers of Barangaroo. It's a project that was actually conceived in 2005, but it's not yet complete. It'll complete in about 2024, 2027 when the train line opens. So over that period, you imagine the way that technology has changed. And we didn't have iPhones when the project was conceived. So as a developer of those assets, for you to keep abreast of all the changes that are happening as you're building these incredible developments, it's actually quite difficult. So we actually take that sort of journey approach. So when we interview, and we do a lot of work with the corporates to say, well, at the executive level, what are the problems you're facing? And at the management level, and then deep within the business, at the asset level, what are your problems? And they're often very different. And often the asset level group has been trying to raise these challenges that they're facing all the way up to the management, but the management hasn't heard them. So it's about navigating actually quite a complex ecosystem within the developers themselves.
And so is that typical to Australia? Is there other countries that are finding that?
It's global, and so I think it's globally the biggest developers are all putting money into this space. So Brookfield actually has a very clear strategy on investing into technology. They have hundreds of millions of dollars of funds. So the big developers are getting it, and I think if you start to see some of the major global players, putting quite a large amounts of capital in this space, that it will filter down.
Okay, and I'll pass on to Kenny. Kenny, could you kind of go into a little bit what you're seeing in the blockchain and the financing areas, and how that's solving some of the pain points that we're seeing in the richness of the property industry, and also comment a little bit about, I guess, what I'm finding is that developer and investment regulation can be a big issue. As I can tell you, planning is really difficult and it takes a while. How, what sort of strategies are you seeing that can help solve this issue with regulation?
I think we'll start with the last question. A lot with regulation is red tape, time. What did the office eat for breakfast? Right? We don't know the results. It needs change from the top. I think the regulatory bodies, the government needs to say, you know what, it's time to look at tech as well. What can we use blockchain for in terms of property transaction? That's ripe for disruption in terms of ownership, fractionalization, tokenization of it. In terms of not just, you can see property transaction now moving to PEXA, for example, only in Australia. But still there is a few issues around it. But once the blockchain does have the ability to take everything online and make it a decentralized way of transacting where you do not need a third party, that poses a larger problem. The government will lose revenue. So they probably will not do that for the next few years until someone else, a first mover, does it. And because they hold land titles, and they're the only recognized body, so that, I think that is a big hurdle that they need to come to the table as well, and something needs to be done there. With regards to how, I might divert a bit from your first question, but the DeFi thing is going to be a massive play for financing. It's replacing banks, and you get to dictate what rates you want instead, rather than the bank telling you, I think this is your risk. So through the whole DeFi platform, DeFi world, you're able to loan at 2.8% now. And I think that's really low compared to external funders, as long as you're able to stake some form of security. So that is the problem. How do we change real world assets, tokenize it, and then be able to get security onto the blockchain and release liquidity from it? So that is there are a few players, local players in Melbourne doing that as well. There is a startup called OpenDAO, for example. They are our partners at STAX. They are trying to figure out ways where you can actually custodize a particular asset and then release liquidity from it. And that can scale up to someone having a house, for example, and I need $40,000. I don't need to go to a bank, have a credit score checked and then do the whole thing just for $40,000. It's the same effort as getting $1 million and $40,000 from a bank. But if DeFi comes online and it's really integrated into the whole ecosystem, someone with a house can go, I'm going to sell that portion of my house, stake it, and get some money. When I'm done with it, I can buy that portion back. And all that is, technology is there. Blockchain is just a technology. We know that it's able to do it. We just need regulations to catch up. And that is, I can't answer that, unfortunately.
Well, great, Kenny. In fact, there's so many other questions that we could ask, and I know that we received a lot of other questions. And I guess that's the beauty of being here in person. So once this finishes, our audience here today can ask our experts, and anyone that's watching the live stream at the moment, I'm sure if you leave a message, if you've got a burning question that you want to ask, we can try and organise to have that answered for you. But I guess on behalf of the Australia-China Business Council, YepHome and STAX, would like to thank our 4 superstar Proptech speakers today. I know I've taken a lot out of today's event, and I'm sure our audience has too. I guess thank you very much, and I might just handball it back on to Virginia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That exceeded my expectations. However, very, very interesting. And I do hope our live stream audience got a lot out of that. We will be bidding farewell to you shortly, but certainly our guests are welcome to stay, enjoy some refreshments, and of course ask some more questions of our terrific speakers. So to Kylie, Jonathan, Kenny, Tony and Ben, thank you very much for participating today and sharing your expertise. The team at STAX, thank you very much for hosting. Millie, Theodore from Aus Pacific Property, you've been terrific to work with, and also our ACBC team, thank you very much for coming in and helping as well. We'd also like to let you know that we do have some more insights into the Australia-China trade relationship coming up. We have the Australian Ambassador to China, Graham Fletcher, will be speaking on the 19th of April, and we have other events in our program coming forward. So anyone who's participated will receive booking details for that event. Anyone online, just jump on our website. And so thank you very much for attending, for your wonderful expertise, and please stay and enjoy some hospitality. Thank you very much.